Well, what is up, everyone? Welcome to Community Conversations. My name is David. I'm joined by my friend Tucker King. Tucker, thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So we're talking about following Jesus in the workplace. So first things first, what's your workplace? Where do you work?
So I work for a remote company. It's called Foreground. We do a lot of different things, but kind of software, a lot of photography-related stuff, and photo GIFs and that kind of thing. So I do design for that company.
So it's remote. You're not in the office because of COVID?
Yeah, well, there is no office. So,
Period.
Yeah.
Ever?
Yep.
You've worked in an office before, though, right?
I have worked in an office, yeah.
Question for you.
Yeah.
When you're in the hallway and you see a coworker, he or she asks, "How's it going?" What's your response?
I guess usually it's just good. It's
good and keep it moving.
Yep. Let's move on. I don't know. Not a whole lot.
My favorite is the guy. There's this one guy at our office. He says, you ask him, "How's it going?" And he says, "It's Monday," or "It's Tuesday." And every single day of the week, the optimism rises. So by Friday, he's fired up. He says, "It's Friday," and
let's get out of here.
It's without fail. And then Monday is just absolutely just
devastated.
It's Monday.
Yep.
So
yeah, we all have those people.
That's him. So you work remotely right now, but you used to work in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
What was that transition like, working in ministry and then transitioning into a real world job?
Yeah. I used to work for some churches and for Young Life. And then after that, I took a job at a nonprofit doing graphic design. And honestly, that transition for me was tough. I think a lot of people, when you're in ministry, at some point there's kind of like a calling, a sense of, this is what I feel like God has for me to do, whether it's like missions or working for a church or anything like that. And so we have that moment when you're not doing it anymore, that you feel like, have I failed my calling? Like, is the purpose of my life like no longer valid anymore? So I definitely had that season for a long time, just trying to process through, what is my life about now? Because I thought that was going to be what it was forever. And so I think for me, like that process, trying to understand what calling actually meant, and I think as I looked into calling in Scripture, I found that so many times when it's mentioned, it's really talking about how God calls us to himself, much more than to a vocation or to a place. He calls us to him. And so what does that look like, when you're working for a secular company or working for yourself? I think it's how can you continue to be faithful to him in that context? And so that's kind of the transition for me. It was tough, but I think like making the transition to be able to see I can, still reach people and be a light and just be faithful in how I walk with him.
And how did that look like for you? You obviously felt called into ministry, and then you felt like that season, that chapter of your life had just come to an end and the Lord was calling you into something else? Yeah,
I mean, it was honestly just hitting a lot of challenges for my family. Like that was just needed to step away in that season. And it was tough. It was a tough transition, but I think, over time starting to see how I can still, wherever I make money, like it doesn't really matter, I can still be effective in ministry and, intentional with discipling people and volunteering with ministries and with the church and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's an important distinction there. I mean, just because you're not working in ministry doesn't mean you can't do ministry in the workplace. So what does that look like for you as you've stepped into a quote-unquote secular job and done ministry there?
Yeah. I think for me, it really, the biggest thing is just loving people well. We're in a situation where you want to, if you're a believer, you want to, try to share that with other people and influence them. But the truth is, we're never going to influence someone if they don't first feel valued and accepted by you. And I think a lot of times we get that flipped over where we're trying to influence them and say, here's the way that your life should look, before we just show them that they're loved and that they're worth valuing. I think Jesus showed that example really well and how he just loved people in general, regardless of what their lives looked like, regardless of how they were walking, or if they were, walking in sin or like shamed by the community or hated. You think like tax collectors and that kind of thing. And he just would show people they were worth his time and attention. And so I think that's a big part of that. I also think part of it is how you work. Is there integrity in what you're doing? I know before I worked in the job I'm in now, I was running my own company for a number of years, and there were opportunities where I could have easily just said, well, actually, this is the price point. Or, I said, we're doing an hourly rate. And so, maybe it was this many hours. And there's ways you can take advantage of people or make more money. Or, if you're in a company, you can try to advance yourself in the career by presenting yourself a certain way. I think having integrity in the way that you actually work and working as if it's for the Lord, I think is a big part of that. Yeah.
I guess kind of going off that too, whenever you step into a workplace, there's individuals with diverse point of views, beliefs, whatever it may be, even preconceived notions about Christians and, the role they play in the world. What have you found to be, I don't know if some of those conversations come up or if you found that you've had to kind of break down some of the preconceived notions, which sometimes may have a negative connotation with coworkers, with fellow employees in the workplace.
Yeah. I think, even in just the past few weeks, like I've heard people talking about, whether it's Christians or it's just kind of talked about in a sense of religious people. A lot of times there's that idea of some of those values that we hold are maybe outdated or just don't fit in our culture anymore. Or they look at us as we're hypocrites or we're, we would only accept them if they're like us. And I think one of our first reactions to those kind of like jabs or statements, like this, just a couple weeks ago, somebody was talking about faith in the sense of, they felt like they were judged or like were asked to perform when they walked into a church. And I think my first reaction is to want to defend, my faith or church and just think, well, no, that's not true. But I think honestly, like starting with realizing, well, this perception is something that you have for a reason. And so how do we make sure, like, I hear you and see where has that been true? Because we're trying to follow Jesus and be like him, but we don't do that very well most of the time. And so we don't represent Christ a lot of the time. And so those misconceptions of what Christ is like is a lot of times because of us. And so I think being attentive and, again, trying to value people and their perspectives. And then also I think being present in people's lives is a huge part of getting rid of some of those misconceptions. Because if we sit on the sidelines and you're working for a secular company and you're just kind of judging people's lifestyles or judging their values, why would they think differently? And so how do you get to be present in their lives? We want to be in the world and not of the world, but you still need to be in the world. And so like engaging people with, the things they like to do. I mean, you grab a drink with a coworker after work or, go do something fun with them, go to a concert or find something that they're into. And it's just really building an authentic relationship with people so that they feel like you're part of their lives and you're not just, again, sitting on the sideline kind of critiquing what they're doing, what they're about. I think that's a big part of showing people that we are like them, but also highlighting the places that we're different. I also think a lot of times people go too far in that direction where they become exactly like the people around them and there's no difference. And I think for that, just thinking through the idea that we become, and I think this is really true, we become the average of the people we spend the most time with. And so when you spend a lot of time with your coworkers or people in the secular world, if you also don't have a strong faith-based community, it's easy to start thinking and having the same values that they have. And so I think that's a big balance to make sure you have a solid Christian community to lean into while you're also trying to reach people and love people well.
You talk about people we spend time with. I think about Jesus and his disciples. They held jobs. Jesus was a carpenter. They were tax collectors, fishermen. What can we learn from their lives about how to approach work? What does the Bible say about work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think obviously work looks different in the modern day than it did back then. They don't have like giant office buildings and Zoom calls and all that kind of stuff.
I don't know too many tax collectors.
Yeah, I don't know any. Well, yeah, I don't know any tax collectors myself or fishermen. So it looks different now, but I think like the idea of work, and Colossians 3 talking about working as if for the Lord and not for men. I think a lot of times we can get frustrated in our work, or we can get frustrated with our boss, or upset about what kinds of things are stressful. But thinking about it in the sense of whatever you're doing in your job and just in what you're working towards, to do it as if it's something that you're serving God with. I think that's a big part. But then, yeah, like you said, Jesus had tons of examples of the way that he, as he's going about his work, he's loving people really well. I think we see him love the uncool or marginalized people better than anybody else, where he's looking at the tax collectors who were just hated by society, or adulterers, or just people that we're not really wanting to bump shoulders with. And I think there's people in our companies that we're around all the time that maybe aren't cool, or they're not going to help us move along in our careers or make us feel good about ourselves. But I think we can love those people really well. And also we see Jesus invited people into a different kind of life all the time. So I think that's something we can do too. With the disciples, he's inviting them from their current life into a different life. We see, like when he meets the woman at the well, he's inviting her to experience living water. And I think we can do that in our own relationships with people at work, to just invite them into a different life, the one that we're also experiencing. And then one of the things I also love most about Jesus is the way that he loved people was often not ways that they would expect to be loved. You think about the leper. Jesus could have just said, "You're clean," but he reaches out and touches him. A guy that nobody else is touching. And I think thinking through, like Zacchaeus, and he's like, "I'm coming to your house to hang out with you and spend time with you." Nobody wanted to spend time with him. And so again, like, how can we love people around us in ways that they don't expect it, or feel like they don't deserve? I think that's an incredible example for us to be able to see. And then also, I think a lot of times we lean into the idea of that concept where it's preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words, which I hate because it's one of those things that I think it leans into our tendencies to be complacent and comfortable, and I'm just gonna live differently, and they're gonna find Jesus through that. I think it can be an awesome influence, and it should open a door, but people don't become disciples of Jesus by accident. His message to us and the mission he calls us to in Matthew 28 is to make disciples. And so that takes intentionality, and it takes words and actually pushing some of those relationships beyond the surface, to actually engage people and say, what's actually going on in your life. There's been plenty of times where I'm in a meeting or after a meeting with somebody, and I can tell something's just off. And you can gloss over that and in the call or in the meeting and go back to your office or whatever. But if you just take the extra minute to just ask them what's going on in your life, you can start building a relationship that's a little bit different, that's deeper, that has more context, and eventually allows you to kind of share where your life and your hope comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going off that, what would you say are some effective strategies for sharing your faith in the workplace? Somewhere in between being passive and not saying anything, and on your first day going up to everyone and saying, "If you died tonight, do you know where you'd spend eternity?"
Yeah.
There's somewhere in between
somewhere
there, right?
in between there is good. Yeah, definitely. So when I was on staff with Young Life College before getting into design, and if you're familiar with Young Life, a lot of times, typically, it's college students who are volunteers, and they go into high schools, or they have events for high school students, and then they go home back to their lives, and then they go back into the high school, and then they go back to their lives. But the ministry that I was part of was Young Life College, and so you have college students who are trying to reach college students, and they're people that are in their classes, people that they're living with, people that they see after school. So there's no going back to your life and like having the off time. And I remember some of those students just like feeling that tension of like, I never get to stop. I never get to be off. And it's like, yes, exactly. Like that's that's actually what life and ministry is. And I think it prepares you for the working world now. Is it shouldn't be I need to present what a Christian looks like in the best way possible while I have this short time, and then I can relax and actually be who I am. I think it's trying to experience authentically what does it mean to have a relationship with Jesus, living into that. And I think it's a really important question that a lot of times we don't really ask ourselves, but do I actually believe that life with Jesus is better than life without him? And trying to understand why you believe that. I think that's a question I've thought of a lot recently, and I've had some conversations with people. I think it's just, if we don't understand really why our lives with him is better than without, then when we're trying to present people with a life that's faithful to God and why that's incredible, there's not going to be much, authentic truth behind what we're trying to show them. And so for me, I think it's experiencing wholeness in a way that I can't without him, that deep sense of peace. Because you can experience happiness quickly and it can go away just as quickly. People can take it from you, or circumstances, situations, but a deep abiding sense of joy and wholeness that we have in the hope we have in God and his presence in our lives. That should be what informs a strategy for living out your faith. And that way, when you have conversations with people, it's not about, again, presenting, well, this is the pretty parts of Christianity. It's about showing my life is messy too. And I can be authentic and explain how I experience brokenness and hurt, but I'm in a relationship with God, a God who is working to make me whole. And I think there's something about that that's really, that's what we're here for, is to experience that remaking and being made new in him.
Yeah. And I mean, we've experienced a lot of brokenness and hurt just the past 18 months with the pandemic. And, I know you work remote, but I know the whole idea of working remote has been a reality for many people for the last 18 months. Maybe they've been used to being in the office or, having those face-to-face interactions, and then now they're just stuck behind a computer screen all the time. How have you found that kind of that shift to more remote work? How can that be an opportunity to share our faith and to do ministry rather than an obstacle?
Yeah. I think one of the weird blessings that has come out of all this is the general population's awareness of the strain on mental health, emotional health. I think if we had issues with mental health or struggled emotionally before, we felt this kind of overwhelming weight of shame, or like, I need to hide this, I need to mask it. And I think we're, for the most part, in a lot of ways, kind of past that feeling where it is okay to be experiencing something difficult and to not be able to mask it. And so I think the opportunity there is that it allows us to start to engage people, again, with more authenticity, with the ability to broach the gap of, you're my coworker, you have your life, I have my life. We'll work on projects together, but that's it. And being able to have more empathy and just step in and, again, ask those questions. What's going on in your life? What kind of things are you struggling with? And sharing our struggles with people, being real about our own hurts and challenges. So I think I think that's been the one thing that I've really seen change a lot in the past year and a half. And hopefully those conversations continue and people feel more comfortable being real with each other.
Yeah. Love it. Have you mastered not being able to be on mute when people toss to you in the meeting, or does that still happen?
Man, it happens less than it did, but yeah, it happens all the time, especially when my dog starts like barking in the middle of a meeting, and so I mute myself and I forget I mute myself, and then I start talking. Yeah, you always think everyone's ignoring you for some reason, and then it's like, oh, no, I'm just the dumb guy who's like moving my mouth and nobody can hear me. So
hey, it's Monday, right?
It's Monday. It's Monday.
Well, good deal. Tucker, thanks for joining us. Was there anything else you wanted to add that folks at home might be interested in?
I don't think so. I'm excited to be able to be a part of this, and I think the big picture for me, when you're doing ministry in the workplace or just in secular world, it really is trying to understand what does life with Jesus mean to you, and not just skimming over that because you've been in church forever or whatever it is in your situation, but taking the time to really process. Do I find joy in him? And if not, talking about that with community and people around you to try to understand, we can find really abundant, full life in him. And if you're not, I think that's worth trying to understand. And when we're able to lean into the life we have in him, I think all of this, it just becomes much more natural and real. And so that's kind of the biggest thing I think I hope people can take from this.
Amen. Tucker, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thank you at home for joining us for this edition of Community Conversations. We'll see you guys next time.